All right, we're back, guys. Interview on location, Dwight Dyer, and I'm here with Alysa here in Georgia. We're not too far from the airport, and we're in a beautiful location. This is a location that I've had listed for a while that I'm really wanting to get booked. And in front of me, I will have Miss Alysa talk about it, tell us all about it, and tell us about you.
Okay, so right now we're in this 1947 former gas station. It used to be a Standard Oil gas station back in the day. It hasn't operated as a gas station in 60 years, so it's just been kind of locked up as storage. I am the property manager. I just saw this space and was like totally enamored with it. It's been completely cleared by the EPA, so there's nothing toxic here. That's good to know, right? It is basically mid-century modern in style, something that you would typically see in the late 40s, early 50s as a gas station. It's completely cleared out, 16-foot ceilings, large windows, beautiful natural light, and it's just an inspiring space to be in. And I was compelled to come and find this place, or find a old gas station, when I was still at CNN, and I was a production designer there, and was a former art director for TBS, and just always loved vintage things, right? So I like vintage architecture, and I like to do some antique and vintage markets. And so I had always thought that maybe I would start either a coffee shop or some sort of like photo or film studio someplace in an interesting building. So I've been looking around, and I went all the way up to Elberton, Georgia, and just really got to know what gas stations involve, and so, or former gas stations involve, I should say, and also really thought about like adaptive reuse and how we can revive some of these small towns and older buildings. And so I stumbled upon this building in 2019, and so I've been really just trying to acquire enough vintage artifacts and things, and experimenting with my own film pieces, just really like art pieces and whatnot. And since then I've started teaching at SCAD in Atlanta, and so I have also kind of bridged the gap with my students and some of the exciting things that are happening there, and also with technology, with XR staging and whatnot, and thought, well, yes, I could really like develop this studio into something bigger at some point. But right now, I just like the rusticness of it. And so I've pulled out all of my antiques and vintage trinkets, and I'm trying to stop myself from getting more. So.
And the last time we spoke, you do have a love for gas stations, and where does that come from? Is that a childhood traveling? Did your mom and dad take you on the road? Where does that come from?
So true, yes. I went on lots of road trips with my parents when I was younger, with my grandparents, and there was always a safe space on these country roads for a black family to stop, whether it was a Stuckey's or a Howard Johnson's or a gas station that looked like it was friendly to our people. And so I really kind of got into this nostalgia, if you will, of just collecting older things. My grandfather was also a taxi driver for many years in New York City, and so I have some of his artifacts as well. And I think that being or growing up in an environment that was relatively new, like a new build house, and I grew up in Reston, Virginia, which is sort of like a planned community, and so there was nothing vintage about it, right? So I just love that history. I spent some time in Europe when I was in high school and just loved how they had, everywhere you walk, there were things that had historical value to it. And I thought about the United States and how we don't really place much value on these older buildings that hold so much history. And really thought about how we travel in the United States and go to these landmarks or pass by these small towns, and really became enamored with older buildings and gas stations just as a back passion, right? And so I didn't realize how much of a passion it was until I started actually taking photographs of older buildings and gas stations and really kind of focusing in on what it was about it that I really liked. And so when you talk about the state of our environment and how buildings and all kinds of things are being demolished and filling up landfills, I thought there's got to be some value in these older buildings. I live in a house that's almost 100 years old. It's so well made, even 100 years later. It's strong and it's solid, and the craftsmanship that went into it is really something to behold. And so I thought, gosh, rather than finding some sort of new place, which there's nothing wrong with that, I figured, why don't I get into restoring something meaningful that is one less building and materials that have to go into a dump. So.
And tell us a little bit about your background at CNN. You talked a little bit about that. Tell us how you got with CNN, and I heard now that they've closed the Atlanta World Headquarter location now. Tell me what you know and how do you feel?
I'll tell you as much as I can.
All right.
I was an art director at TBS, and I actually started out as a designer there. I've been in graphic design and broadcast design, if you will, for let's say 30 years. And when I left TBS, I actually went to SCAD Atlanta to try to get my MFA. I thought that I wanted to teach at that point. And I then eventually went to Savannah and finished up my degree down there, and then came back to Atlanta and said, I'll teach for a little bit at Art Institute, and then thought about keeping at least one foot in the industry. So I started freelancing at CNN just through some mutual friends, and then ended up really working full-time and being a full-time production designer there for another 8 to 9 years. And so I've been with Turner for almost 20 years. And then of course it became Time Warner, and now Warner Media Discovery. And so they're making big changes, and they are really going to move over to the entertainment campus in Atlanta. So they're just basically using that other property, and they are going to change some things up. They do a lot of their production out of Hudson Yards in New York City. And they still have a lot of the basic properties, domestic graphics and a lot of things that operate out of Atlanta. And so our home base will no longer be that iconic CNN downtown. They just celebrated their 43rd birthday, and a lot of people came down to stand out in front of the large CNN and take a picture. But I think it's definitely different, and it will be probably just a new venture for the company. While I was there, I took on the project of CNN Heroes 1 year and just really enjoyed it. I think that it helped me to really feel like all the bad news and tragedies that we had experienced in the news during the year were redeemed by celebrating these awesome people who were doing wonderful things all over the world, volunteering, giving of their time, changing the world. And so I thought, well, gosh, this is, nobody else seemed real interested in keeping up with this project, and I really enjoyed it. And so every aspect of it, from working with photographers to get these people's stories across, and photojournalists, and all the producers, and then the set designers, and then all the full production of it to honor these people. And the people themselves were so humble and really so engaging, and so I really loved that. So for 5 years I worked on that before I left, and then I came back as a freelancer and worked on it. So it helped me to earn 2 Emmys for graphic design for my involvement with this team. I really, really just think that it is, I hope that it continues. Because I think it's a wonderful thing for a network or anybody to honor people who are really making a difference in the world. And when you hear about things all over the world and you wonder, I became kind of like a news junkie, and it was just seemed like bad news all the time, right? And so I really just think that was the highlight of my career there. Just to be able to work on such a great thing. I feel honored, honestly.
Long term, do you see yourself staying in the Georgia area? Do you see yourself possibly going back to New York to do some unfinished business with some of your colleagues? Or?
I can't see that happening, maybe just for a trip, right? But I think that Georgia is my place, I think it is. I could see exploring other areas, honestly, but I think this is the home base. So.
And circling back to this location, give me a little bit more creative info so I can tell some folks who want to particularly shoot here.
Okay.
What some of the perks, some of the things that we need to be observant of. Go ahead.
Okay. So this location is 25 minutes south of the Atlanta airport. It is also about 20 minutes from the Trilith community, the Trilith film production community, and it is also between Fairburn and Noonan. It is a quiet little town. It's near a park that has, about 33 parking spaces. There's ample parking spaces on the property, so you don't have to pay extra for parking. There is water, of course, and all the conveniences of HVAC. So I have heating and cooling and fans, and you can park 2 vehicles in the garage bays, and it also has really great access to a number of different things. So I'm developing or building my prop library. Right now I have an old Coke machine and an oil can dispenser and some old newspaper receptacles, and then I'm also building a sort of library of furniture, furnishings, mid-century modern, as well as some more contemporary pieces. I do have a couple of lights, but I'm expanding on that as well. And I'm looking at acquiring a couple of old gas pumps. And so I did have a chance to kind of rent one recently, which was really nice. But now I know I need to get my own, right? So, in addition to this location, it is also about 7 minutes to Serenbe, this wellness resort or community. And so there's really great restaurants there. It's a wonderful community just to even spend the weekend. and I would love to be able to start a small farmers market out front on the weekends, maybe at least once a month, and then work my way up. And so I'm really kind of in tune with this community in terms of being or having access to fresh food and produce. And there's a lot of rural farmers, and I just think that it would be a great opportunity to have folks come and sell their wares here, and keep this more of a community spirit going. And so I think that there's a lot of opportunity. Just got to build on it.
Sounds great. Okay, well, I appreciate you interviewing with us today, Miss
Okay.
Alysa. And we will give the contact information for anybody wanting to book this. I know you have a great relationship with SCAD already, so having the students and active production companies is always a great thing for them to come through. And yeah, we'll see what happens. But once again, thank you again for inviting us into this space that I love so much. You talked about the bones and your love for gas stations and vintage,
Right.
and this is kind of right up my alley. So
Yeah.
stay tuned, folks. And for those who want more information, make sure that you go ahead and follow us here on Georgia Film Connection. And this is Dwight signing off with Interview on Location. Take care.